We like to think of America as a land of opportunity and second chances. But what happens when a web of government restrictions prevents someone from earning an honest living due to past mistakes? I'm Kim Norberg of the nonprofit civil liberties law firm, the Institute for Justice, joined by co-host Keith Neely. Today, we're talking with IJ attorney Andrew Ward and Rudy Carey, a substance abuse counselor and former IJ client. We discuss so-called permanent punishment laws, the millions of people they affect, and how IJ is helping Americans get the fresh starts they deserve. This is Beyond the Brief. So, Andrew, what do we mean when we talk about permanent punishment laws?
When we are talking about that, about permanent punishments, it's the consequences of a criminal conviction besides the normal one that you'd think about, like going to prison, paying a fine, having to do community service. Those are sort of the normal ones that you'd think about, but there are a lot of others, and they can last for the rest of your life, which is something a lot of people in the criminal justice system don't know. They're hearing, okay, this is a deal, I'm going to maybe do 2 years, and what they don't know is that other things are going to keep affecting them, different sorts of legal restrictions. So some of the most common ones that listeners might be familiar with are loss of the right to vote, loss of the ability to own a firearm. Those are both for felonies. But there are a lot of them. There are tens of thousands of them. And a lot of them end up happening in employment, which is, mostly what we're here to talk about today. You can be barred from working in any number of fields because of an old criminal conviction.
How many people does this affect?
A lot. So if you count arrests, 1 in 3 Americans has some kind of criminal record. The numbers can be pretty high depending on what particular part of the population you're talking about. But there are places where 1 in 12 people have committed a felony. And given the fact that a lot of occupations are licensed, that used to be something like 5% 70 years ago. Now it's closer to 25% of jobs. You need a particular permission from the government to be able to do that. The interaction of those things is that a lot of people can be covered by these sorts of restrictions, can be subjected to these permanent punishments.
So you touched on this a little bit, Andrew, but, obviously occupational licensing is somewhat of a modern phenomenon historically, and I would assume that these sorts of permanent punishment laws are also fairly recent in origin. What's the history behind these laws? Why did states enact these sorts of restrictions for people who had previously committed criminal offenses? Yeah,
so you're right that this is a relatively recent, we're talking about a 20th century invention for the most part. In the sort of like origins of our legal system, there weren't that many crimes to begin with. There were like 9, and all of them were punishable by death.
Right.
Because basically all of them are things that we would consider very serious, like murder and arson. Where these come from is a mix of things, but it came along with the growth of the sort of criminal state itself, as there was an increasing growth in the number of crimes, and nobody knows how many there are today. Justice Gorsuch of the Supreme Court was actually just talking about in an oral argument recently that he thinks it's like 300,000 ones just at the federal level, but he's not sure. There are a lot. And as those have grown, there's been a simultaneous growing number of restrictions in different professions. A lot of them started out in sort of the 30s and 40s with these random restrictions about good moral character that weren't anything specific. But if you wanted to be like a doctor or a lawyer, you had to show that you were, someone who was trustworthy. And they only grew from there. Some of them grow from, I think, a generalized sense of fear. Some of them are very, very specific, and I couldn't possibly explain to you why they're there. Like if you wanted to do blood tests on chickens in Pennsylvania, you used to had to prove good moral character. That law doesn't exist anymore because we got it changed. But they've been growing to the huge number of restrictions they are today for the latter half of the 20th century.
So, Rudy, can you tell us a bit about sort of your past, and you're a substance abuse counselor, so kind of what led you to that career?
Well, it started a while ago. So after coming home from prison on April 16th, 2007, I had to get into a treatment facility to kick my drug habit, which was heroin, crack cocaine. So after doing that and getting into a 12-step program, moving to Fredericksburg, it was some people that was in the rooms, and they was like, "Hey, you ever thought about going back to school and trying to help people?" So it was this one particular lady at the time. She got my first job working at the homeless shelter, Thurman Brisbane Center. I started out, I think it was like 6 months to a year. I was just a tech. And I began to find out I love to do that. I love to help people, try to change their lives, look at another side of the story. So from there, I just continued to go to school, became a case manager there. So I was more working individually with the clients, which was kind of like my thing to do. And so a position opened up at FCCR as a substance abuse counselor. It's kind of ironic because prior to that, Miss Melzer asked me like, "Hey, what do you really want to focus on in this career?" And I said, "Substance abuse." And so they hired me on as a counselor, um, and I began to love it, And so that required more education. So I had to go back to school, and I came up here a lot to Alexandria, I believe it was, to Nova, where I could take the necessary courses to become a certified rehabilitation substance abuse counselor. So that's kind of where everything kind of took off for me.
And then things sort of got derailed a little bit, right? Can you talk about that?
I think derailed is an understatement.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, so roughly, I was in my last semester and a half of college. That was in 2018. Around about March or April of that time, the owner of FCCRs decided to sell the company. Another company came on. It was more of a corporation, Pinnacle, and just going through whatever they had to go through for the change of hands. My name and another person's name came up because we had a burial crime. So shortly after, about a month after I got my bachelor's degree, because that's what I needed to begin to get the supervision and get the take the CSAC exam. They called me in the office one day, at the end of the day, and the lady set me in the room. She got, I think it was the HR person on the line, and they was like, "Hey, we're gonna have to let you go based on your burial crime. We can't keep you here." I kind of held my burn for a while. They offered me a job in Pennsylvania because in Pennsylvania that law could continue me be working in the field. And so I was like, "Hey, I'm willing to do that. However, are you guys going to help me pack up, find a place to live up there to work?" And they said no. And I said, "Well, I can't do that." So upon leaving there, it was kind of like I was still in shock. I was really in shock. Like, this has got to be a dream. This cannot be happening. So it didn't really hit me until the next day. And I came to work, and they talked to me again, and they told me my last day. At that point, it was just a very sad time for me. It was a hard transition. I had built a lot of relationships with the clients, built a lot of relationships with my coworkers. And so I knew I had to do I have to move on. I have to tell my clients individually that I had to leave. And I couldn't get into a lot of specifics. And it was this one client that I had been with since I started there, and I was the only person that he ever opened up to. And I remember trying to hold back my tears to tell him that I couldn't be his counselor anymore. And And he grabbed me and he held me and he's like, I don't know what to do now. And after that session, I told my boss, I said, I have to go. I need to kind of get myself together. It was a very painful and spiritual transition for me, because I began to question my faith. I began to question, why did he bring me through all of this? It was a very dark period for me.
Did you know IJ represents ordinary people, free of charge, as they fight back against government abuse? If you're looking for a rewarding way to support our work, consider becoming a member of our merry band of monthly donors and stand shoulder to shoulder with IJ's clients every month of the year. Monthly donations are convenient and cost-efficient, meaning more of your money goes directly to our fight for freedom and justice. Sign up to donate today at ij.org/monthly.
Andrew, can you talk about sort of the legal stuff that's going on here? Because all of this is kind of confounding. Like, he just said, you know, he's certified by the state to do this job, but then the state also kicks him out of the job. Like, nothing here makes sense, right? So
I agree. Yeah, all right. So what happened is that Virginia has something called a barrier law. It says if you have any one of these 176 different convictions, you can't work in a direct care position, substance abuse counseling included. And you might think those would be like, oh, wow, they were having a real problem. And so they, like, if you've been convicted of taking advantage of patients, you're not allowed to do that anymore. That's not what it is. It is this complete hodgepodge that doesn't make any sense. The crimes that are on there, you know, some of them are more like crimes you've heard of. Other ones are recklessly driving a boat, shining a laser pointer at a police officer, hazing for initiation into a gang. The list of this goes on. None of them, to my eye, have anything to do with substance abuse counseling. Rudy mentioned that he had a drug problem. He was convicted in 2004 of assault on a public official. He ended up hitting a police officer while he was high. You know, that was in 2004. We're talking now about him working in the mid 2010s, and he was incredibly qualified. People wanted to have him there, so it's all illegal. But he goes, and this company he's talking about knows he's great. They don't really quite understand the law. They hire him as an independent contractor, thinking it's okay. Like, all right, well, he's not allowed to work here, but if he's 1099, you know, maybe that'll be all right. And he stays on doing great work. You know, he was talking about that one client that opened up to him. They gave him a Counselor of the Year award. I mean, I have heard people talk about how, like, this guy saved lives. When this other company came on, they were not sure that this was okay. They got in touch with the government of Virginia, and Virginia says, no, we have this law. All of this was illegal the whole time, and it is a flat ban for life forever. So none of that stuff about how good a job he was doing mattered. And that's why you have this woman from the department saying, nope, he is not allowed to be a counselor.
I mean, isn't the effect of these sorts of laws effectively to prevent people who have been convicted of criminal offenses from really being able to re-enter society and improve themselves and help other people?
Yeah, this is one of the problems with them for sure. And I think there's actually really a growing consensus, looking at it from the left, from the right, whether you're talking about, you know, being able to support yourself, bootstraps, do something better, or whether you're talking about forgiveness and second chances. You have the Obama administration, you have conservative think tanks all sort of agreeing that, yeah, that is one of the problems. You know, having a job is a way to prevent reoffending. States with tighter occupational licensing seem to have increasing rates of reoffending. And yeah, that's exactly one of the problems. It harms those people, of course. It gets in the way of an idea of rehabilitation, and it harms other people too, right? You have someone who is trying to help other people because he's particularly qualified to do it. He's been there. The industry looks for people who have been there because they can relate. So it's not just that he can't work and that people trying to get back on their feet can't work. It's that people who could use their help, the rest of the community hurts too. And you don't even have to take my word for it. The agency that oversees this law, the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, has a whole fancy PowerPoint presentation about how this law blocks people with, and I quote, invaluable experience. But that is the effect of it.
So, Rudy, how did you find IJ to kind of be part of this case? What was that process like of getting involved in a lawsuit here?
Oh boy.
Do you remember?
I do. I do remember. I was coming through Ohio. I was driving my truck. I was trying to head back to Herb and get this load off so I can get home to my family. And Andrew calls. I'm driving down 80, and he's like, hey, my name is Andrew. Is this Rudy Carey I'm speaking with? Blah, blah, blah. And he's a lawyer, and he got my name from someone, and I'm like on my headset, like, who in the world is this? Who are these people? And I remember he asked me a couple questions like when was I going to be back in town, and he would like for us to meet, and then he said this word, right? And so coming from a criminal background, it kind of was like, this is not true at all. He says, yeah, and we want to represent you for free. And I was like, hold on, wait a minute. I said, no lawyer does anything for free. He's like, no, seriously. When you come back in, let us meet for some tea. And so I'm like, okay. So I told him I was going to be home that weekend. He said if I had some time, we'll meet up about halfway. And so I get off this phone, and I'm like, this is like, for real, this is
a scam.
I don't have time for games right now. And so I called my wife, and I told her about it. I called my sponsor. I said something to him about it, and he was like, just see what the people are talking about, And I said, okay. So we met in Dumfries, Virginia, which is ironic, at a coffee tea shop, and it was him and Mike. They were both there, and I was like, okay. And it was a bunch of IJ magazines, and so I was looking through some things, and they was talking to me about some particular cases, and I was like, okay. And I'm kind of flipping through, and he started giving me these papers to sign, and I'm like, am I about to sign like my life away? But I signed them, and he told me to say, hey, just give it some time, think about it. If you're serious, we'd really like to represent you. And so I took the magazines home, and I went through them. I got back in my truck the next day, so I looked through them some more, read through some of the cases, and I said, man, these people are for real. So I just prayed, and me and my wife talked a little bit more, and I remember calling him maybe a few weeks later, and I was like, all right, I'm in. I said, I'm all the way in, right? And I don't know if it was that day or maybe a couple days later after we had talked about when we was going to launch, and I just began to say, whether it's for me or if it's for someone else, it really doesn't matter. What matters is that it's not fair, and people, other people need to be helped. And then I think I said it was either you or Mike, I was like, listen, I didn't come looking for you guys, right? I said, you guys came looking for me. And so I know that this is something that's sent by God. So I'm just going to work. I'm just going to ride it out. So we showed up in Richmond. That was a whole a thing. I had never been in front of cameras and lights and stuff like that, and reporters asking me questions. So I was really emotional, real anxious, just a lot of different feelings. And I just was watching them and how professional they really were, and it kind of took off, and then he surprised me when we was eating lunch that day and was like, hey, oh, by the way, we have to go see Jasmine Turner and I was like, Jasmine Turner? I'm like, who is Jasmine Turner? Oh, we got to go to, what is it called?
It's NBC.
NBC on your side.
Richmond NBC.
And I was like, what? And so we went and did that, and it was just, I just believed that God was going to work it out no matter what. And there were some hiccups in the road. It was some hiccups in the road, especially after I got off of the road and came just doing local driving. It was some hiccups, and I almost gave up twice. I was asking myself that coming up here. I almost gave up twice, and I think Mike called me in 2023, and I was like, Mike, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. This is taking too long. He's like, just hold on, man. We got a case coming up. And I was like, oh, what? And he's like, yeah, in May. I was like, okay, cool. Sounds good. And then the other time was when they canceled on us in May, 2 weeks before the hearing. And I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, this is just not going to work. And then I just talked to my wife again, prayed, and then everything just kind of happened.
Do you want the other, like, behind the scenes aspect of that? So
Absolutely.
We get to pick our own cases in contrast to someone showing up and be like, I fell down, take my case. I want to sue about a crack in the sidewalk. So I have a bunch of Google alerts set up on things like good moral character. And I saw a news story about this law. It was about another woman named Melissa Brown, who wasn't able to work. We went and talked to her, and she said, I know this guy. I had this colleague, Rudy Carey. You should give him a call. He would make an excellent plaintiff. And that's how it went down. And then I dealt with the curse of being an IJ attorney, where you show up and say, I would like to offer you many thousands of dollars of highly qualified legal services. And then you have to get people to believe you. And that's why I bring our magazine to show that we're a legitimate organization.
It almost sounds too good to be true at a certain point.
Yeah.
So what happened in the case? Like, how did you talked about some hiccups in the case, like, just real quickly, kind of how did that all unfold?
Yeah. So the case was a bit more arduous than we might have expected. Basically, the judge was not interested in getting to the merits of the claim. What we were saying was this is not rational, that there is a constitutional right. It's been longstanding in our legal tradition for centuries that you can't be stopped from working in a field that you want to work in without some sensible reason. Not an amazing, the best reason in the world, but like some decent reason. And we were saying that, look, banning this guy because of something he did in 2004 when he's clearly rehabilitated, that doesn't make a lick of sense. You couldn't possibly support that. And the judge didn't really want to address that claim. He basically said that Rudy wasn't harmed by the law because the law might someday be lifted if he were ever pardoned. That he would be able to work if the governor pardoned him. And even though he wasn't allowed to work right now, the theoretical possibility of him being able to work in the future meant that the judge couldn't decide that case. We thought that ruling was quite wrong, but that's the ruling we got, and we spent a lot of time trying to deal with that. We eventually ended up in the federal appeals court that oversees Virginia, but then things happened before we actually ended up arguing the case there.
Yeah, I mean, the one of the many problems with sort of the court's reasoning there is, like, the pardon process is just an absolute, circus. You have no idea what's going on. They don't tell you anything. You have no idea when you're going to get a decision, if you're going to get a decision. And so it's just very much this sort of black box. But not to bury the lead or anything here, but you got your pardon eventually.
I did.
So, I mean, not that the court was right. Like, the court was obviously definitely wrong, but
no,
it
but he
worked out
did turn
for
out
Rudy.
to be right. And
Yeah. So what was that like for you when you got this pardon?
So you want me to start from the beginning, or you want me to start right at the pardon?
Wherever you'd like to start.
So in August of 22, the secretary from the governor's office called and made it in like an emergency that we have this meeting to. She had to go through some questionnaires. She made it seem like this was like ASAP emergency SOS from the governor. So
can I interrupt you really
yes,
quickly?
absolutely.
When did we file the lawsuit?
we filed in fall 2021.
So this is like shortly after sort of the case launches, and then, you know, some number of months later, they're calling Rudy.
11 months later, yes.
Yeah.
This is after press about the lawsuit seems to come to the governor's attention.
Gotcha.
But I couldn't tell you why things happened the way they happened.
So you're in this meeting with them.
Yeah, so I called Mike. I think I reached out to, I think Andrew was on vacation, which was fine. So I called Mike and I said, hey, the secretary from the governor's office called and wants to do this questionnaire. And she's saying it's like ASAP. And so we set up a day. I called her back, told her a time. I said, hey, do you mind? I'm going to be driving, but I can do the interview. She said, absolutely. So she called, and then I put Mike on the phone just because I just needed some legal ears on the phone with me, make sure I was staying within my parameters. And so we went through the whole thing, and she was like, hey, I need to get this to the governor's office now. He's waiting for this now. And so like my spidey ears was like, man, this is about to happen. Like, woo, this is about to happen. So I'm pumped up, and me and Mike, we talked a little bit afterwards, and you know, months went by, and I was like, what is going on? So September 9th, 2023, I'm working overnight for this local company. And so I happened to get up this morning, and it was my boss calling me. So I needed to figure out what was going on for the day. So we were talking, and this 804 number called, and I was like, okay, you know, whatever. And so it hung up, and it called right back, and I was like, that's kind of weird. Somebody's trying to get in contact with me. And so I just kept talking to my boss, and I said, okay, I just called him afterwards, and it hung up again, and it called right back. And I said, hey, Dave, I need to get off the phone. I said, this isn't, I didn't know if it was like one of my kids or, you know, I didn't know what was going on. And so as soon as I was hanging up the phone, it called right back. And it was the lady I had spoke with, and she says, is this Rudolph Henry Carey III? And I said, yes. And she said, the governor has issued you a pardon for everything you've committed. And I was like, what? Like, I said, is this like a game? Is this a joke? She said, no, this is not a game or joke. And I was just, I was speechless for a very, very long time. And I remember her saying to me, she said, are you still there? I said, yeah. And like tears was like coming down, and I was just looking out of my window, and she said, well, I have to get to a meeting. She said, but I want to email you. I want to make sure I have the right email. So she said, can you tell me your email again? So I told her. She said, so as soon as I come out of this meeting, I'm going to send it, right? So I'm thinking like, okay, it's going to be like 1 o'clock. And like 30 minutes later, the email comes across. Like nothing seems real until it's real, right? And so I open up this email, and I can't even read the letter. I can't even read the letter, and I'm just crying, and I'm thanking God for what He's doing, and I text my wife, and I said, babe, I said, the governor just gave me a pardon, right? And she says, that's so funny, because me and my coworker were just talking about you, and she said, God is getting ready to work it out. And I was just like, just blown away, right? And so when she came home, I printed it out, and I began to read it to her, and I'm crying, and I'm like trying to like hold it together because I have to go to work, and it was just there's a lot of emotions going on for me, and I called or I texted Andrew and Mike, and I was like, hey, I have to go get these fingerprints. So I had to go to work. So by the time I came home, it had been Friday morning, and I scheduled an appointment for Friday morning, and I went to right across the street. I actually sort of kind of crossed the street on Route 1. I went to the state police department, and you know what I mean? I remember us going back there, and I was like, so what is this we're doing? And he was like, well, you're getting a whole new set of fingerprints. And I was like, well, what does that mean? He said, well, These current fingerprints has your whole criminal history with no stamp on it saying that these crimes have been simple pardoned. So when we get these new fingerprints, it's like you're a new person. And he said, congratulations. And so that was the beginning of my life again. So I immediately, I had to go to the event out California, and that was like so surreal. Like everything was like, man, this is like a celebration for me. And came home, and I got connected with a young lady in Richmond named Peggy, and I got into the PRS class. So I said, let me kind of come in this door first, kind of get my feet wet. So I completed the class, and I seen a job ad for Mainspring Recovery in Dumfries. And I applied, and I had like 2 interviews, and finally the guy hired me, and I started on November the 6th as a peer recovery specialist group facilitator. And it was really exciting to be back in the field, kind of nervous, kind of, because I had been out for over 5 years. It was just like, okay. And then in February of this year, they promoted me to a counselor. So I'm a counselor supervisee. So I have to redo all of those 2,000 hours again, which I'm like super not bothered by it at all. So it's been a rough road to climb. I'm very excited where I'm at, but at the same time, I know there are some things I need to learn and relearn because the things in substance abuse have changed so much. The language, the therapeutic approach has changed, which I'm kind of familiar with. So it's more person-centered versus me as a counselor telling you what you need to do. It's more like, what do you need help with, and how can I help you achieve these goals? So it's a little different.
Obviously, your past history with substance abuse gives you a ton of experience in how to help others through that journey. Could you talk a little bit about what motivates you to help other people who are in the same sort of dark places that you once were?
What motivates me the most is, first and foremost is that God never gave up on me. That's the first thing. The second thing is I never had those opportunities to be able to give back like that. I've taken so much from society and communities through my drug addiction and the things I had to do for drugs. And it's something within me that's been deposited. I guess that's the best way to answer it. That being able to help someone with no strings attached is the best blessing I can ever give anyone. That's like if I had to leave a legacy, that would be my legacy, is that I was able to say something, impart some type of wisdom, some type of experience that may change the course of your life. And even to this day, even walking in after having a bad couple of days, just to see the clients, just to see them, and to always remember that used to be me. I used to be in that dark place, and I just want to pour some light into them.
Andrew, it takes a lot of courage to be an IJ client in the first place. And then you have cases like this where you really have to put yourself out there and share, a vulnerable story. Those clients, I imagine, are pretty hard to find. And I know that we have another case that we're launching in Virginia that's like Rudy's. Could you talk a little bit about that and how difficult it is to find the right client to bring these sorts of cases?
Yeah, so it is difficult because what's fundamentally going on is you're looking for people whose past is haunting them and then asking them to come out and talk all about their past and about all this stuff that has happened to them because of a mistake they made a long time ago. And people are reluctant to do that. It takes a special and rare person who's willing to work with us because they want to get these things changed and fixed. And happily, here's the callback, not just Rudy, but the woman who was in the article I mentioned earlier, Melissa Brown, that connected me with Rudy because they were coworkers together. She was in that same situation. She has a barrier crime. She was convicted of robbery in 2002. She was working at that same place as an independent contractor. She's forced out, even though Virginia has certified her as fit to be a counselor, because that's a different agency, not the agency that kicks people out. That's the agency that says people are good to work. And she's come back working as a plaintiff with us. We've filed another challenge to this same law just last month, and she's suing to pick up the torch that Rudy had to put down, because wonderful as it was that he got pardoned, that ended the case since he was no longer affected by the law, and now we're trying to get this fixed all over again.
Is Melissa able to get sort of the same pardon that Rudy got? Does this kind of take the same path from here?
It doesn't seem like it. I talked about some of the oddities of this law and that it seems like a weird hodgepodge. Of the 176 crimes, it says that you get to work if you've been pardoned, if you've committed the crime that Rudy was convicted of, and only that one. So no. It seems like even a pardon wouldn't make a difference in her case, which I think goes to show just how harsh this law is. You know, permanent apparently means permanent.
Well, harsh and also kind of arbitrary, because there's like 170 or 180, or I don't remember the number.
176.
There you go. I expect the lawyer to remember the number of these sort of barrier crimes in Virginia's law. And you're saying one single one of those 176 has this sort of pardon loophole, and the rest of them don't for some reason.
That is correct. And, you know, while we're being specific with specific numbers, this is a real problem. It's not just about this law in Virginia. Nobody knows how many of these laws there are. One estimate from a few years ago, though, was 27,254, which I apparently can't even say straight because it's so many. There are a lot of these out there, you know, so working on getting them fixed.
So, Rudy, before we wrap things up, is there any advice that you would give to other IJ clients that are fighting against these kinds of laws?
I would say trust in these lawyers. They truly have your best interest in heart. And even though the road seems long and rough, sometimes just hang in there and just have faith.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rudy, for joining us. And thanks, Andrew, for coming on.
Anytime.
That's it for today. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.